thin film thermoelectric cooling device, and the team is here today, Rama Venkat Subramaniam and Robert Armiger.
All right. Good afternoon, folks. It's indeed a pleasure to talk to the folks here. Amazing set of presentations, and so it's indeed an honor to talk to you all. Before I go further, I want to just thank the team at APL. And what I want to communicate today is what we have developed here and what we show here is a small microcosm of what we can actually accomplish in a range of topics. But at the end of the day, in terms of what we can all be most happy about is what does it do for quality of life for some of the most challenged. And that's what Bobby, my colleague, will be talking about. So without much further ado, so at the end of the day, before you can even make any great contribution, you have to look at, so where does the basic science come from? So the concept of using electrons to pump heat or essentially convert heat to electricity. A lot of people may be already familiar that NASA, for example, uses thermoelectric devices to power some of its outer planetary missions because there is no solar energy sufficient to power the electronics and other things. So they use nuclear heat. So this technology is not anything new, but what we have developed is a unique material science that leads to great advancement in all attributes of this performance. So we are using electrons, and so now instead of using global warming potential HFCs, which are almost like 100 times more than CO2, we can use electrons to pump heat and create refrigeration. At the same time, they are compact and miniaturized so that you could potentially put it on in a specific point of an amputee to create a thermal sensation, or you could actually create a refrigerator. Essentially, if my dream is going to come true, we essentially want to be the lithium-ion battery equivalent. So where you can take your lithium-ion battery and put it in your cell phone or put it in a Tesla. We are talking about cooling a very small point on your human body or create a refrigerator. And then the analog of this is you have the ability to take heat and convert electric power. So you saw the previous presentation where you have to use batteries to power the robots, and say on a satellite surface it moves around. Essentially, you want to be able to power the robot using energy harvesting. So things like that are possible. So all good science and all good technology always starts with fundamental science, either in physics or chemistry. So in this case, we are taking our inspiration from the atmosphere. You know, you all have seen the blue sky starting from the red to the blue, where the reason why that happens is because you got various particle size that scatter light at various wavelengths, creating this beautiful image. And so we are taking a page out of that and creating hierarchically engineered structures. So why do we need that? So basic thermoelectric material, what you need is a material that is a good conductor of electricity because we're using electrons to move heat, but at the same time a poor conductor of heat. Okay? Why do you need poor conductor of heat? Because you're using electrons to pump heat from one end to the other end, so you don't want the heat to flow back. Okay? So it'll become a very inefficient refrigeration device. So you need a material that is a good conductor of electricity but a bad conductor of heat. So how do we solve this conundrum? So we create what is called a material that has got these periodic structures at the scale of almost like a few nanometers, because you have to match it to the wavelength of the heat conducting what are called phonons. So essentially we create these materials using deposition techniques like molecular beam epitaxy or chemical vapor deposition. But these are they may look fancy, but these are scalable. In fact, techniques like this are used to make solar cells for our satellite systems. So we essentially create a phonon blocking or a heat blocking material, but at the same time electrons are able to zip through. So now essentially we have compared, this contest is about design. So we have created materials by design. Now we have created device by designs, thanks to ComSol and other folks. We have actually used design engineering to build these devices. At the same time, you can see here what we do. So because these devices are made of thin materials, you could actually pump heat very fast at a high cooling power density. At the same time, used very little materials. We were almost using 1,000 to even 10,000 of the materials for the functionality. And because these are compact, you can put it, and I'll give you an example of the infrared camera that shows how fast these devices, and why does the speed matter? 33 milliseconds. So essentially, that is the speed with which you are able to create a biological sensation, which Bobby is going to talk about. And the speed directly translates into energy efficiency, and at the same time, a phenomenal array of cooling applications ranging from okay, so everything from satellite cooling imaging arrays to cooling engine electronics and cooling hotspots in microprocessors. But I want to share with you today, all these things are sort of great, that it gives a whole range of possibilities, and we have actually demonstrated at APL, but most importantly, you can see here we have created refrigeration in open air because of the ability of this cooling devices to pump a lot of heat. But you can see here it's creating a refrigeration in open air where you can have the amount of, just to give you a perspective, the amount of freezing is comparable, is having a freezer open, and is essentially you're creating ice almost 10 times the size of the refrigerator. So at this point, I want to hand it over to my colleague who will talk about the human quality of life implication.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Ram and I come from very different technical backgrounds. He's a material scientist. I'm a biomedical engineer. And to illustrate one of the applications of this unique technology, we turn to the area of prosthetic limbs, and particularly restoring function for those who've lost limbs. The image that you're seeing here shows some of the work we've done at APL in advancing this sort of dexterous robotic technology. And there's been a lot of work done for being able to grasp in a very natural way. But what's been lacking is providing that sense of touch feedback. And it's important to recognize that, in speaking with, some amputees, the hand is really a way that we interface with the world. And beyond just sort of being able to know that you've got something in your hand, we hear things like, I want to be able to reach out and feel the warmth of a loved one's hand. I want to be able to feel the chill of a cold drink. And that's exactly what this is enabling. And when it comes to restoring tactile sensations, there are invasive means, and you can use electrical stimulation to the peripheral nervous system, but that has issues of wires passing through the skin. It can be bulky electronics, and in particular, thermal fibers are such a small diameter they can't be readily targeted. We use an approach called targeted reinnervation. So if you actually take the nerves that were severed when the limb was lost, and you remap them to viable tissue in the remaining arm, it creates a surrogate site that you can extract signals from the body and put signals back in. So when an individual with an amputee, they'll feel bicep, 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 but in exactly a certain location, that'll feel like it's coming from the phantom hand in a very natural way. And so if we can place these devices over that, it will literally restore that sense of touch in a very natural way. And so, let's see here. So this is also where the innovations that have come from the material science perspective have made the impact because of the speed of these devices. And so we've run trials with individuals both with and without amputation, and by creating a very sort of focal and quick response thermal feedback, that basically reduces the reaction time, it increases the intensity of that feeling, and in some cases, with sort of slower commercial off-the-shelf devices, individuals can't feel any sensation at all. And so we've done this both in the physical environment as well as the virtual environment. And again, this illustrates the ability to restore that touch. So this short video kind of shows the end-to-end process. So this is me working with Johnny Matheny. He has an above-elbow amputation, and he's controlling this arm through wireless electrodes. We're mapping out those sites where he feels tactile feedback and placing the thermoelectric cooling device over top of those. And so then he now we're basically creating a closed-loop feedback system where when the limb uses its built-in temperature sensors to either grasp an object, we can send those directly back to the thin film cooling device on his reinnervated skin, and it is completely seamless for how he's restoring this. So in this case, he's identifying the cold object, in a variety of scenarios. And again, cheers to Johnny on that. So we'll wrap up here. So beyond just the sort of applications for individuals with limb loss, we actually see a lot of further applications even in immersive and mixed reality environments. And so whether you're doing training or think about a future FaceTime call where you can actually reach out and feel the person on the other end of the line, we're exploring those as well. And so this initial experiment in augmented reality is showing our collaborator Luke, and he's identifying 3 virtual objects that have different levels of stiffness as well as different temperatures. And he's basically arranging them in this virtual environment from the most stiff object to the least stiff, and he's also identifying which object is cold. So again, these are fully sort of virtual objects, but he's directly feeling them. And so just to wrap up here, again, this is really kind of a very exciting area because we're taking a technology that was originally developed for spacecraft in the aerospace industry, and this is a totally new application where we're looking at how we can advance these technologies in a scalable way. And I think the most tangible example here is where we're actually restoring a quality of life for individuals so that they can connect with the world in a new way. So with that, I'll thank Rama and our colleagues and happy to take any questions.
Questions?
Very, very good project, in fact. One thing raised my eyebrows. I'm an aerospace engineer, and the cooling for jet engines and gas turbines. Basically, apparently you said the cooling is for electronics. Can this be applied to other skins of the engine, like blades, shrouds,
Yes.
stuff like that? Because if that's done, I assure you that the jet engine will have almost, now the efficiency is something like 35%. If we raise it 5%, we're going to have a revolution in the industry.
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, as I mentioned earlier, there are two parts to this device. It can, if you provide electric power, it can cool, or so for example, you can cool the electronics of a microprocessor that controls the engine flap. On the other side, you can plaster it on the side, on some of the hard surfaces of the aircraft and do energy harvesting and potentially have aircraft health monitoring sensors. And I've talked with United Technologies, for example. The long-term goal is to have more electric aircraft and essentially control the whole electronics and landing systems with this type of solid-state devices. Yes.
Second question. I think it's on. It's very interesting that you're using the amputees as well as VR, AR systems. In the amputee system, do you have to map individually each person at this point?
Yeah, so great question. So yes, when we do the targeted reinnervation surgery, we get essentially a ballpark of where the reinnervation is going, but that is fundamentally a natural process. It is very quick. So when we work with an individual, it takes only about 10 or 15 minutes to go through and understand what their individual map looks like. But it is very different across the population. But we have the ability, because we're using wireless sensors, to localize and develop a very customized feedback system for each individual.
And then following on with that, do you have the ability, do they not see as much phantom pain?
Great question, because that is probably the #1 reason why we do those reinnervation surgeries. Because again, if you have an arm loss, those nerves, it's like a cut wire.
Right.
And when the brain sends out a signal and there's no response, that creates this sensation, if folks aren't familiar with phantom pain. Imagine an itch that you cannot scratch because it is in a limb that does not exist. And by closing the loop and actually providing true sensations, we've seen a drastic reduction in phantom limb pain, even besides this sort of restorative functional benefit. It's a great question.
Okay, thank you. And then from the AR, VR perspective, are you approaching that in a more universal way? This will be either a fingertip display, a fingertip device that will be used. Help us understand that.
Yeah, great question.
So we are looking at a wearable device where we could essentially use it as part of a gaming strategy, or we could potentially for some, say, pain management, for example. People have shown that if you can do a rapid cooling, rapid heating to 45 degrees C and do a rapid cooling, you can essentially numb the nerves, essentially trick the nerves to avoid pain transmission. So there are a lot of possibilities in wearable pain management devices as well.
One last question, I apologize, but this is interesting. I noticed a reference to CWRU. Are you working with Hopkins on this?
One of our collaborators, Luke Osborne, he has just left APL and is joined Case Western. So we are planning significant collaboration with them because they are a great lab in this. So just one more point to that, to the location of the phantom limb. With Johnny, the amputee we work with, he has come back after a year and a half during this experiment, and to our satisfaction, these pain points, the phantom locations were almost exactly the same. So there's a consistent, so you can implement these things over a sustained period of time.